Our relationship to space and time is changing as we become more omnipresent and asynchronous. We live in several spaces and act in different timelines simultaneously. We need new frameworks to understand these shifts and how they affect the way we relate to each other. Can quantum physics provide answers? Digital Pilgrims is a voyage on an immaterial sea, a collective search for meaning. Listen to the episode and join the conversation. Episode 17, Omnipresence and Asynchronicity.
Digital identity can also be considered through the lens of some proposals that were established in our society after the development of quantum physics. This theory became widely known when we accepted the superposition of states for matter, positing that it can be in different, even opposing conditions at the same time. And when it was proposed that we measure those states in terms of probabilities and not through distinct answers. Another interesting concept is that of the observer's paradox. According to this notion, every observation implies an effect on the object being observed. Therefore, we no longer consider the observation of an element as a merely passive and descriptive fact. It is an action that impacts the system in one or more ways. We can thereby establish that perception is one of the determining factors in the states of things. Many states are possible up until the moment in which they are observed and thereby given parameters. This allows us to think about identity in the digital environment as an aspect that, in addition to being defined by difference from an other, depends fundamentally on how it is perceived by those others who shape it through their acts of perception. The construction of that multidimensional identity occurs collectively. As happened in Da Vinci's case, it is more and more difficult to define someone with a single word. People are not their productive activity, they are multidimensional, a cluster of unique experiences and characteristics. If we were to compare a single individual's different social network profiles, we might think we are looking at different people. A person might have a social profile and a digital space for each of the activities they take part in. None of those identities fully encompass the person, but at the same time, these are the ways they present themselves to society, relate to others, and have an impact on the world. The person does not belong to a single brotherhood or community, they belong to many. In this way, we could say that individuals express themselves multidimensionally. They participate in many ways at the same time and beyond their physical bodies, and connect with other identities which are also asynchronous and omnipresent. Hello. It is possible that comprehending the implications of an asynchronous and omnipresent identity creates a certain difficulty for consciousness. However, this condition made possible by digital technology, apparently so new, has already happened to us as a species. In other words, omnipresence and asynchronicity are not characteristics that are catalyzed exclusively in the digital environment. Humanity has already experienced different levels of omnipresence and asynchronicity thanks to other technologies. Something inside us leads us to explore those properties in different expressions of our experience. For example, in the 15th century, the printing press freed knowledge so that it could be multiplied and last over time. The technical repeatability of books allowed for one copy to be the same as another, that is, for that particular knowledge to be spread independently of who had produced it and to be read at any time, even centuries later. Knowledge that was once safeguarded for a select few, passed down from master to apprentice or dependent on scribes, became independent. This had such an impact on people that it began a scientific revolution. Knowledge became omnipresent and asynchronous. We can identify similar processes related to omnipresence and asynchronicity during the Industrial Revolution. After transforming the spread of knowledge, the first great productive revolution during the 18th century had a definitive impact on the objects we find in the world. With mass production, for example, the standardization of measurements was introduced. In that moment, the measurements of everyday objects came to be. Plates all had a roughly equal diameter. Cups held a uniform quantity of cubic centimeters. Tables were all the same height. In particular, clothes were no longer tailored, but rather mass-produced in sizes. In addition to the evident effect this gradually had on how one builds their personal style, in reality, the generalization of a universal style, it also had an effect of omnipresence. In 1801, Joseph Marie Jacquard implemented the loom that bore his name and introduced a crucial characteristic for the development of the textile industry: a system of punched cards that allowed for any user anywhere in the world who had the machine to completely reproduce a complex design almost effortlessly. The design of a piece of cloth was definitively dissociated from the space-time coordinates of a creation. In addition, there could be thousands of pieces of cloth that were all the same. Today, it is easy to take this for granted, but we must not minimize the impact of moving from artisanal production to a panorama in which objects were exactly the same. As if the impact of these changes were not strong enough in itself, the environment was transformed through urbanistic improvements that allowed people to access a standard of infrastructure that made the city a more hygienic and organized place, and above all, a place that was measurable and similar to itself. People and products could be moved around in less time, objects and spaces became uniform, and the sensation of permanence was thereby increased. The presentation of urbanistic and production standards required humanity to develop strategies that put into perspective its relationship to space and time, deepening a process that had been developing over the course of history. As occurred during the Renaissance, people during the Industrial Revolution saw a world extend around them that was a bit more omnipresent and asynchronous. Today, we find ourselves in a moment in which these characteristics seem to define how we build our identity and perceive reality. Until digital technology appeared, these seemed to be characteristics that defined our environment and customs. But today, we are discovering that they also define us. This new identity is not easy to comprehend because it presents its own challenges. This crucial aspect is where we crash into digital technology rather than connecting with it. Omnipresence and asynchronicity also present dilemmas, far removed from our ancient way of building our identities. How do we reconcile the human right to make mistakes and forget in an environment that lacks a past? In the era of fake news and deep fakes, what relationship do we establish with the truth? The new multidimensional identity exists beyond the physical body, bringing together the growing totality of information that exists about us, our profiles, and online activities. It is also built in community. Without a doubt, this leads to a great challenge if we compare it to all of our learned notions about identity. The question that hangs above us is whether this is simply an evolution of the concept of identity, or whether it is a complete transformation.
In the next episode, question what defines us as a species and whether we can redefine humanity outside of time and space. Digital Pilgrims is a podcast based upon the book Digital Pilgrims Towards a Quantum Humanity, sponsored by Codiful, a unique service management platform for remote teams.